Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Facebook Live from Breast Cancer Now. We're delighted to have you joining us this evening, and hopefully it's lovely weather where you are, as it is where I am this evening. So just a few housekeeping rules to begin with, just before I introduce you to our guest tonight. I imagine a lot of you are very familiar with the format by now, but hopefully we may have some new members as well that have joined us today. So if you have any comments or any questions that you would like to ask during tonight's session, please put them in the comments box on Facebook, and we will get through as many of those tonight as we can do. If we run out of time, then anything that we don't answer tonight, we will answer tomorrow in writing. So the session should run for about 40 minutes or so this evening. And just to let you know that the next two Facebook Lives that we have coming up, we haven't got anything next week, but we have two the following week. So we've got one on Tuesday, the 24th of June, which is a Q&A session on secondary breast cancer with Catherine and Katy. And the following one is Thursday that week, the 26th of June, and that is on understanding breast cancer and its treatments, and that's with Dr. Andy Proctor. So please tune in for those as well. As always, at the end of the session, there will be an evaluation form. So we really appreciate any feedback that you have. We want to know what sort of subjects you would like us to cover and how we're doing and how we can improve things. So as always, feedback is always very welcome. And I think without any further, just to remind you that these sessions are recorded and it is a public forum. So anything that you put up or any questions that you put up will be visible. If you would prefer to ask things privately, you can always phone us on our helpline tomorrow, and that's open from 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Or you can write to us on our Ask Our Nurse service, or you can send us a private message on Facebook if you would prefer. So there are other ways to contact us if you'd rather it was confidential. Anyway, so tonight's session is all about accessing psychological support for people that have been diagnosed with breast cancer, which is a really important subject. And we know that there are many ways that you can be emotionally impacted and psychologically impacted after a diagnosis and treatment for breast cancer. So we're going to talk about that today. And we're also going to talk about a new online resource which has been developed with our guest, Professor Lynn Calman, tonight. So she's going to talk through a little bit about what the resource is called, and it's called Can Empower, and we will put the link up for you as well so you can have a look at that in your own time. She's going to talk to us about how this was developed, what led her to develop that. And then we're also going to talk much more generally about psychological impact of breast cancer and any issues, any questions that you might have regarding that. So I'm sure it will be a really interesting session. And without any further ado, I'm delighted to introduce you to Professor Lynn Calman this evening. Thank you ever so much, Lynn, for joining us and for giving up your evening to be with us tonight.
Thank you very much for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, so nice to see you. What we'd like to start with maybe today, just to begin with, is just to maybe give us a brief introduction to yourself and your background and what led you to develop this Can Empower tool.
Of course. So I'm Lynn. I'm a nurse by background. I'm both an adult and a mental health nurse. So I've always been really interested in my practice as a nurse around the psychological impacts of a physical illness. And that kind of progressed through the years. And for the last 20 years, I've been working on research around living with and beyond cancer, and in particular, the psychological impacts of living with cancer. And I think it was really all of that research I've done. I've done a lot of qualitative research, so interviewing and speaking to patients about what's important to them and what's going well with their care and treatment, some of the things that maybe we could do a little better with. And something that always came up was people's psychological well-being and emotional well-being. And so as a team, we had a look around to see how we could think about best supporting people, and there were a number of different apps and different things that people could use. But we know that, particularly psychological support with clinical psychologists, it's really challenging, long waiting lists to get to see people. So we wanted something that people could access anytime, day or night, was easy for people to access, and had lots of information to support people. So that's really what we were looking for when we'd started to develop the resource.
Excellent. And it's for anybody with any type of cancer, isn't it? It's not just for people with breast cancer.
No, absolutely. We went through a really rigorous process of developing Can Empower, which had a really significant amount of involvement with people who had lived experience of cancer. So a whole range of cancers. There were a number of people who were involved who had breast cancer. So we feel confident that it will be helpful for people with breast cancer. But yeah, we had a really rigorous process where we involved lots of people to ask them what they might like to see in an online digital resource. And then when we started to develop, we got lots of views and experiences about how people were using it, how we could develop it further, all those things. So yes, so it was developed for across the board with people with all different types of cancer, but we definitely had quite a number of people with breast cancer as part of our development group.
Yeah. And there's a lot of common themes within that, isn't there? So I know it's an incredibly comprehensive website, and you can access it at any time in your treatment as well, can't you? So I mean, I know there are common themes that have come up. I don't know if you want to sort of explain a little bit where that came from and how it was sort of planned.
Yeah, so what we did was we ran a number of sort of engagement sessions with patients, so sort of focus groups where we brought people together around, I don't know, it was probably around sort of 40 patients we got together in different groups to tell us what was important to them. And you're absolutely right, lots of common themes came through. So worry when you're going through tests and preparing for treatment, worry during treatment, worry after treatment, and many years after treatment, still some worries coming through around cancer coming back, for example. So we certainly, when we talked to people, got a real sense of actually some real common themes that were coming through and things that everybody really wanted help and support with. So that's what we've kind of put into the resource to help and support people.
Because I know there isn't a right or a wrong way to feel when you've been diagnosed or when you're receiving treatment for cancer, and you go through such a range of emotions, varying from shock to anger to guilt, fear. All of these things are very, very common and very natural and understandable to experience them. And I know there are certain ways that you are offering coping strategies to help to manage these emotions, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. So one of the parts of the resource is just to kind of explore that whole range of experiences that people have, and feelings that people have, and problems and issues and concerns that they come up against. Now, some of the problems and issues and concerns that we can support people thinking about different ways of problem solving, using goals and things like that. So that's part of the resource, is to think about sort of, I suppose, general problem solving type techniques. But then there are some aspects that you can't problem solve your way out of. How you're feeling, you can't problem solve your way out of. So there are lots of things within the resource that then help with supporting how you're feeling as well. So sometimes the coping mechanisms are really useful for helping people feel like they're taking back a little bit of control, and they're beginning to understand what's important and to tease out some of those problems. But there are other things that actually are really difficult to problem solve, and we've put in some things that we hope will help people sort of manage some of the emotions and feelings that they have. But you're right, there's no right or wrong way, and there's a huge range of emotions that people can experience, definitely.
Yeah. So I know something that we get a lot on the helpline. We have lots of people phoning up with emotional impact of cancer and having all sorts of, as I said, a range of different questions and fears and anxieties around that. Something that we find is very common is once their treatment comes towards the end, and it's that fear of recurrence once appointments finish, feeling almost like their safety net has disappeared. And have you got any strategies that you would say would be helpful for managing that type of thing?
Yeah, I think that's really important. It's a really important kind of point of change in people's experience. Is often people talk about being on a real treadmill of treatment, seeing people really regularly, and then they feel like we've had people tell us it's like falling off the edge of a cliff. It's like, that safety net has gone. That, the treadmill has kind of stopped, or the run off the end of it. So absolutely, and some of it I would say might be around starting to prepare for that, and we know that people's social networks in particular, so the networks you have around you, the people who are close to you, your family, your friends, your community, are hugely important in supporting you. So one of the things in terms of kind of preparing for the end of treatment might be to start to think about, what networks do you have around you and what might you need now? Because you often need different things when you're on treatment and in and out of treatment centres a lot, and there's not much time for other things, and then you come to a point sort of preparing for that point. So something about preparing for that, I think, and also recognising that other people may feel, well, your treatment's finished, and people have varying outcomes from their treatment, but for lots of people say, well, your treatment's finished, so you should be feeling better, you should be getting back to normal. And I think that's often the time where people feel that kind of, I don't know, dissonance or incongruence between how they actually feel and how other people expect them to feel. Oh, you'll be back to normal. And
you
actually
look
that's
really well. Don't you look well? Haven't you done
exactly.
well? Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. And that's, I think, a really tricky time for people. When actually maybe they're how they're feeling inside is not necessarily how people want them to feel or expect them to feel. And I think one of the things that we've got in the resource is to think about how you might talk to people about how you're feeling, and how you might think about explaining some of those things to people, that actually, yes, I look well and the treatment has finished and it's been very successful and X, Y, and Z. But actually, I'm now just got this space to think about what's happened to me. And it's often at that point where people feel a bit like suddenly they feel a bit overwhelmed because it doesn't happen to everybody. Everybody has a different experience, but some people can feel a bit overwhelmed because they've got the space to think about it
The
after the
time to
treatment.
process it,
Yeah,
exactly that, isn't it?
exactly.
And that's how a lot of people do say, is like when you're going to appointments day after day after day, you don't have time to think. You're just thinking about the next step, and once that finishes, you've got time to look back and go, goodness me, what's just happened to me, and now I
Exactly.
need to process all of that. Yeah.
Exactly. But that's often the time where people are expecting you to, get back to normal, whatever normal is, or,
Yeah,
and actually that can feel quite challenging, I think, for people as well.
absolutely. Carol has asked here, one of my friends has advanced bowel cancer, so not breast cancer, and she's getting chemo and she's struggling mentally. Where's best to suggest to her to get support? And that doesn't matter what type of cancer it is what we were saying, isn't it? They'll be very
No,
similar.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
Canon Power could be helpful. I mean, there's certainly some techniques there, but absolutely. I mean, obviously the speaking to your clinical team is really important, because if you have higher levels of worry or anxiety or distress, or maybe even feeling quite low in mood, depressed, it's really important that people talk to their teams about that, in case people do need a higher level of support. But actually, for people who want some support, this is really helpful, and it's a good place to start to know what's available for people.
Yeah.
So absolutely, they could use this. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But as you're right, it's not instead of the treatment team, and the treatment team should always be
No.
informed, and you should be talking to them if you're feeling that you are struggling, so that they're aware, and
Yeah.
they can talk about support that might be available locally to you as well.
Exactly.
And that
Exactly.
can be
Exactly.
things like some hospitals have really good cancer centres, such as the Macmillan centres or Maggie's centres, where there is support and support groups available. Others maybe don't are a bit more remote and they don't have so much, but your friend's nurse specialist should be aware of what is available locally, and that's a really good place to begin. And if they do need referrals to more specialist support, they can get the ball rolling with that, because as we know, there is sometimes quite a long wait for some of those things as well. So the website is a really good place to sort of look at in the interim, really, isn't it? So
Definitely, definitely, and sometimes we've found that people just kind of having some reassurance, this is okay to feel like this, is
Yeah,
actually really incredibly helpful, actually.
yeah.
And there are lots of stories from patients in Can Empower, so hopefully there's something where people can sort of resonate with some of the stories and some of the experiences of people as well.
Yeah, because there's videos on there as well, isn't there, and lived experiences and things
Yeah,
like that. And
definitely.
certainly, I know from working on the helpline and talking to other people, and also helping out on some of the support services that we offer, people find that it's really, really useful to talk to other people that have had that lived experience, that have been there and gone through it as well, because they get it in a way that often other people can't, and for no fault of their own. It's just that they haven't had that same experience. They can try to understand, but they've not been there in the same way.
Yep, oh definitely. And so one of the resources on Can Empower is a link to something called the Cancer Care Map, where
Mm.
you can put in your postcode or your local area or town, and it can come up with some resources as well. So, for example, support groups, peer support groups in your local area as well. So, absolutely, there's huge value for some people in speaking to other people with the same experience. Again, everyone's
Yeah.
different. Some people don't, wouldn't enjoy spending time with people who've had a similar experience and want to kind of own their own experience, and that's absolutely fine. But for a lot of people, that peer support is really very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that we offer at Breast Cancer Now as well. Some people may be aware of our Someone Like Me service, where we can match you with people that have had a similar experience to you or a similar diagnosis, and you can talk to them on the phone, which can be really, really valuable as well.
Yep.
Maggie has just asked a question here. She said, is it up to the patient to seek such support? I had breast cancer 15 years ago and diagnosed metastatic last year, but never once have I been asked about anything but physical issues. I guess this isn't unusual.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not unusual. And if the video of Joanna, who's a person with lived experience, and she talks about that. She had a really challenging time. She had a leukemia, and had a really challenging time. And despite that, nobody ever asked her about her psychological well-being. So again, there's a part of Can Empower which is around talking to healthcare professionals about how you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
That might be helpful if you want to start to think about how to broach the subject. But really, I mean, healthcare professionals should really be asking you about your holistic well-being. And some of you may remember or not having something called a holistic needs assessment, and all cancer patients really should have something called a holistic needs assessment. It was probably either a clinical nurse specialist or maybe a navigator, cancer navigator, cancer support worker who was involved in that. And that really should include people's psychological, physical, spiritual, emotional, social needs within that. So it should. So I'm sorry about that experience, but it should be. But I would definitely say that if you want to talk to somebody about your emotional well-being and they're not addressing it with you, then please do bring it up in conversation. Although it should be part of
Yeah.
what we call the holistic needs assessment.
Maggie, if you've got a breast care nurse, absolutely. So I'm sure they would want to know. Sometimes the clinics get so busy, and sometimes you may feel that you don't want to raise that because you don't want to be taking up time. And we certainly hear that a lot on the helpline as well. But absolutely, as nurses, they will want to know because they'll want to make sure that you are supported. And equally, we have a helpline Monday to Friday, 9 till 4, and you can always phone and speak to our nurses on the helpline as well if you want to talk about sort of the psychological aspects and psychological issues that you're experiencing, and we can help signpost you to other services that might be helpful for you. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Lynn. The holistic picture, it should all be taken into account. And sadly, sometimes there isn't enough time in clinic for that always to happen. But
Yeah.
that is the role of the team to make sure that you are supported emotionally as well as
Yeah.
physically.
If people aren't asking you, then please do start broaching the subject
It
if
can
you
be
feel able.
difficult though sometimes, can't it? And I think a lot of people don't want to. For a start, maybe they feel that they're quite shy. They don't want to open up in that way, almost open up the floodgates, sometimes people might feel. But also, they don't want to be taking up too much time, which is another concern as well that people do have. So the Can Empower website does talk about that, and how you can open those conversations up a little bit more. And talking to your network around you. And you touched on that a little bit as well earlier, Lynn, about how your network is so important to you. And also, I suppose it's worth acknowledging that sometimes that network isn't who you thought it would be. Because quite often you will find that the people that you thought would be there to support you no matter what might distance themselves a little bit, which can be really hurtful, and can be really quite difficult for people to sort of manage. And contrary to that, you might find that somebody that you don't know that well, for example, is the person that actually does step up and then does start offering that support in a way that you weren't expecting. So sometimes it's not predictable who's going to be there to offer that support for you.
I completely agree. And again, some of the research we've done around social networks suggests that people with really what we call diverse social networks, so with lots of different types of people in it, maybe somebody from your local community group, as well as your family, as well as, somebody you go to a badminton club with or church with or something like that. So it's something about having a variety of people is really helpful. But I think you're absolutely right. It can be unpredictable. In terms of people often say, I really found out who my true friends were when this happens, and I think people often do resonate with that it's not always the most expected people who are there to support you, and people need support in different ways. Sometimes you need practical help, sometimes you need emotional help, so it's and having a diverse group in your network can actually be really helpful for different things as well. You might ask one person for one thing and another person for something else, so that can be really helpful.
And if people do withdraw, it's usually not done out of any sort of malice. It's because they don't know what to say and what to do, and they can have their own fears, which they don't want to say the wrong thing, so they think it's better not to say anything at all. So it can be very difficult to sort of navigate all of that as well. And I know on the website you talk quite a lot about family and friends and support for them as well, and the website is equally for them as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. So although we didn't develop it necessarily with sort of family and friends in mind, as we were talking to people, we always knew, but we continued to recognise how important people's family and friends were. And so we've got a little bit in there about family and friends. But if family and friends are having emotional concerns or worries, some of the techniques or all of the techniques in here would be extremely helpful for family and friends as well. And there's a little bit also in there about children, talking to children, and resources for talking to children as well to support their well-being. And again, Joanna, who does a nice video at the beginning of Can Empower, talks about the impact on her children who were teenagers at the time of her diagnosis, and again that people didn't really recognise the impact that it would actually have on the whole family. And so there's some resources there to point you to places where there's support for the whole family.
Yeah, lovely. And some of the coping strategies that are mentioned there's some that are more general, I suppose, things like mindfulness and breathing techniques and things like that. And then there are the more targeted types of sort of strategies as well, and techniques, things like acceptance and commitment therapy. Do you want to talk a little bit, explain a little bit about what that is? Because it sounds quite complicated, but actually when you break it down, it's not, is it? So
that's a great question. So we worked with some really great clinical psychologists on the development of Can Empower. We wanted this to be very multidisciplinary, so we had nurses, we had doctors, we had clinical psychologists, but the clinical psychologists really wanted to make sure that Can Empower had a kind of a psychological, a proper robust psychological foundation. And we talked about lots of different approaches to psychological well-being and therapy and support, and we came down on something called acceptance and commitment therapy. And usually that's a type of talking therapy. It's sort of aligned with CBT, but it's a little bit different, because cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is often about helping you change how you think and feel. And lots of people might have heard about the NHS talking therapies and cognitive behavioral therapy, whereas acceptance and commitment therapy is a slightly different way of thinking about how we might manage our thoughts and feelings. So, for example, at the heart of that is something called acceptance, and that doesn't mean I'm accepting feeling awful. It means that sometimes we have to think about embracing the thoughts and feelings that we have, and saying, actually, I'm going to have to live with this, so I'm going to have to make a bit of room for this, and say, well, how do I live my life alongside how I think and feel? One of the other techniques is to work on having a little bit of room between you and the thoughts. So often the thoughts and feelings we have are right in front of our face, and that stops us doing lots of things. Whereas actually some of the techniques are just about not throwing them away or not changing them. It's actually just putting them down. And how can we put them down so that actually we've got a bit of room and space in our heads to manage that. Mindfulness is really important, because that's about being present. So mindfulness is not, it can be about relaxation, but in this context, it's much more about, again, giving yourself a little bit of room in your head, being present rather than your thoughts. Often people's thoughts run away, and what happens if this happens? Well, how will I feel if that happens? What's the future going to hold for me? And actually that often stops you being in the present again, and enjoying things that are important to you in the present. And at the heart of all of this is getting people to think a little bit about what's important to them. You know, what really matters to you, and are these thoughts and feelings maybe stopping you doing some of the things that are really important to you. And again, thinking about ways in which people can sort of manage living alongside those thoughts rather than changing those thoughts, because we know that it's very hard to. You can't just say to somebody, just stop worrying about your cancer coming back.
You can't dismiss them, can you? No.
Exactly. So this is an approach which is much more about, well, how do we live alongside some of those difficult thoughts and feelings? Acknowledge they're there, but live alongside them. Yeah. And actually, there's a really good evidence base in cancer that this is very effective for people with cancer. As I say, a lot of the psychologists that, if you need more support, are actually using ACT. So we've turned it into more of a sort of self-management model through this website.
That's great. I mean, something about acknowledging your thoughts and your fears is something that is very powerful, actually. And I know quite often we hear people saying, well, I'm going to give myself 15 minutes to think about this, but then I'm going to make that a finite amount of time, because I'm going to go after that. I've got a plan. So until I go out for my coffee, or until I have to walk the dog, I'm going to allow myself that time just to think about all the things that I'm worried about, knowing that after that I've got something else to do. So it's not going to consume me for the whole day, but it's acknowledging that those worries are real and they are valid and they are there as well. Because as you say, you can't dismiss them, and it's not helpful for people to say, oh, you're going to be fine, and just put that beside you, behind you.
Exactly.
Because your whole context has often changed as well, hasn't it? So it's that a lot of people say as well is about the change in identity, and the way that you think of yourself and the way you think about your life can really alter after a diagnosis.
Yeah, and again, there's part of the website's got some information and points you might want to think about around that, and really acknowledging that people often, not always, but often say, I'm not the same person that I was when I had before my cancer diagnosis. Sometimes that's about physical changes. Sometimes that's around how you feel about yourself, and again how you feel your role and identity has changed as well. So there can be quite big shifts for people, and again it's important just to acknowledge that can be for some people be part of the experience of living with cancer.
Yeah, and priorities can alter as a result, can't they?
Definitely. Yeah. And we also know that some people can have an element of growth from their cancer diagnosis as well. So we often talk a lot about the negative impacts of cancer. But for some people, there can be, again, maybe sometimes with those shifting priorities. I worked really hard, and I didn't always make the time for people, but actually now I recognise that I want to shift my priorities. I want to think about being around for people more than maybe I was before. So there's also recognising that there can be an element of growth that people don't choose, of course.
Yeah.
But there can be, for some people, an element of thinking, well, actually, this has allowed me to think about life in a slightly different way.
And I think it's important as well not to overlook how treatments can impact upon the
Oh, yeah.
psychological, your psychological well-being as well, and your emotional well-being. So we often hear on our website and on our helpline about, for example, menopausal side effects. That can be a huge side effect for people with breast cancer, and that can impact on mood. It can impact on sex and intimacy. It can impact on fatigue, and all of those, and your sleep. All of those things combine to then impact emotionally on you as well. And it's trying to sort of almost unpick all of that and manage those side effects in a way that can be beneficial for you as well.
Exactly, and sometimes, as you say, it's actually quite hard to unpick where the root of it is, or solve the problem, or so sometimes it's just about those sort of small wins around, okay, what can I do here that might make me feel, what can I do today that might make me feel a little bit better tomorrow, or what are the small things. So the website is all about small things. It's not about changing everything, but yes, there's an acknowledgement in the website, absolutely, around those kind of physical symptoms, the treatment, the fatigue, how significant that is for people, and the impact of that on people's psychological well-being as well, and emotional well-being. Yeah.
And on their relationships with other people, so with their family members.
Definitely, yeah. So there is part of the website that focuses on particularly intimacy and sex, and that's really important. And again, that sort of changing body image as well, that can have huge impacts on people.
Yeah. And again, there's lots of information on our website about these things as well. So you can always have a look. If you go onto our website and put into the search engine, the search button on there about any of these subjects, it will come up with information as well that you can find more information. And as I said, our helpline is always open as well.
Yeah. Absolutely, and we do, because we know there's really great information out there, we have signposted to places that have done a really good job, much better than we could, around some specific issues. So if there's some really good quality evidence and support out there, we've signposted to it. So a lot of the people who've seen it feel that it's a bit of a one-stop shop, if you know what I mean. There's lots there that you can look
very
at.
Very comprehensive, isn't it? So yeah. And you don't need to be referred to use it, do you? So it's something that anybody can use. Certainly the healthcare professionals are getting more aware of it now, aren't they? But you don't need their referral or their permission for you to access that.
No, absolutely not. So the website is live, it's there. I think it'll be in the chat for you to have a look at. Please use it. Please come back to us if you've got any thoughts around it. But absolutely, so we've got a section of the website is for healthcare professionals. So we've put together a little guide, sort of, in thinking about how healthcare professionals could work alongside you with this. So this is definitely not an instead of. So it can be that you can just go to the website, there's no login. Again, the people who we worked with said, if I'm feeling really worried or anxious, the last thing I want to have to do is remember a password. It's a website rather than an app, so it can be accessed on your phone or your computer or your tablet. From wherever you are, you can access it on the web. So these were things that people told us were quite important to them, and just having that access whenever people wanted it, and not having to worry about passwords or anything like that.
Yeah. And that's really important, accessing it as and when you want it, because I know certainly a lot of people, it's the middle of the night when the worries hit, when you're quiet, when you haven't got those other things interrupting you all of the time, and it's at that point that you then get these thoughts sometimes. And being able to go on the website at 2 a.m. and have a look at look at that and think about that then can be really quite beneficial.
Yeah,
So,
that's exactly what people told us as we were developing it. They just wanted because there are times where, yeah, you can, if you're worried, you can call a helpline, etc. But actually there are moments where there isn't anybody there in terms of calling a helpline, and actually this could be really helpful
yeah,
for people at any time of the day or night.
lovely. I don't think we've had any other questions come through at the moment, and I think I've covered most of what I was going to ask you, I think. So we've gone through, I mean, we've also mentioned, haven't we, how the emotional responses vary from person to person, but how they change as your cancer journey continues as well. I suppose it's important to acknowledge that as well.
Absolutely. And for some people, the feelings can go on for quite a while after they've had treatment, because there's, as I said, there's a worry about cancer coming back, for example, worry about other people in your family as well. That can obviously be a really important issue for people around sort of genetic testing, and worrying about other people as well. So I think there's a lot that can go on for across that kind of whole sort of spectrum. And yeah, people's thoughts and feelings do change over time, and things that people are often in real shock when they have the diagnosis, find it really hard to take in lots of information. And then people's things can be really different for people as they go through different types of treatment, and have different experiences as well. So definitely.
Yeah, and we certainly hear that a lot, how initially at the beginning often you haven't got the questions because you don't know what to ask and you don't know what's coming really, so you're focusing on the next appointment to get that more information, and it's as time goes on things start to sink in, and it's at that point that you do need that support. And there is a really good signposting place as well on your website, and also on our websites as well, if you do need any extra psychological support of where to go. And the NHS does offer it, and you can self-refer as well. As we said, there is sometimes a wait, and we do know that some of the charities have stopped providing the support that they were doing, so there is a bit of a gap there as well. But there's also signposting for financial support and things like that that some people do find, that can add to anxiety as well. So it's a very holistic tool, and it covers pretty much any question that you've got. You will find some information and some support there to help you with that. So.
Absolutely, but we're really keen to get people's feedback. I mean, this is a starting point, it's not an end point for us, and there are lots of things that we might like to add, or do some sort of slightly different things with the resource. So please do drop us an email. The email address will be, I think it's in the About Canon Power tab at the top. So please do get in touch with us if you want to let us know what's good about it, what you think needs to be there. That would be really helpful as well.
Lovely. Well, I think that brings us nicely to the end, and thank you so much for your time this evening, Lynn. It's been really good to talk to you, and I think we've covered quite a lot there, so I hope people have found it helpful. And as Lynn said, please do have a look at the website, the Canon Power website. Any feedback that you have, do get back to her with that. And equally, if you've got any questions that have been raised tonight that you would like to talk to somebody about, then you can always phone our helpline tomorrow morning, and that's open from 9 o'clock. And the number is 0808 800 6000. We're there 9 till 4 Monday to Friday, and on Saturday mornings as well. Or you can send in any written questions that you have to our Ask Our Nurse written service too. So I think that sort of nicely rounds up for us this evening. If you've got any comments on this session, it would be really great to complete the evaluation that's in the box at the bottom there. So we will be very grateful for any feedback. And we will see you again in a couple of weeks' time for our next Facebook Live, which is, as I said, on Tuesday the 24th, which is a Q&A on secondary breast cancer. and its treatments. So thank you again so much for all of your time, Lynn, and thanks to Kev for helping to produce all of this in the background. You don't see Kev, but he's a star. So thank you both ever so much, and we will see you again soon. All the best. Have lovely evenings, everyone.